Hello friends, welcome to A Gentle Healing Journey. My name is Rain Francis, and on my channel I talk about how to deal with life's struggles and challenges. This video is part of my series about why we stay in emotionally abusive relationships. But of course, this could apply to any type of abusive situation. Today I'm going to talk about the first reason why we stay, and that's a lack of understanding of the abuse. I recently posted a video and it was called Types of Abuse. I'll link that in the cards above and in the description below. After that video aired, I got quite a bit of nice feedback from people who thanked me for that video because it helped them to really understand what they were going through. A lot of the times we wear rose-colored glasses when it comes to our partners, our spouses, or our loved ones, don't we? We don't see their behavior as abusive because we don't quite understand it. If we were brought up with abusive experiences, we had abusive relationships in the past and somehow never realized that this was not normal or healthy, then it's very possible that we stay due to a lack of understanding of the abuse. I remember the first time that a counselor on one of those distress hotlines said to me, "Rain, you're in an abusive relationship." I remember feeling surprised and shocked at this because it didn't make sense to me. Yeah, my husband was grumpy. Yes, he was moody. He swore at me. Yes, he called me names, but don't all people do that sometimes? Well, the answer is yes, all people get grumpy and moody. Some people swear and call their loved ones names, but in a healthy relationship, when this happens, the person at fault will recognize that this isn't mature and healthy behavior. They'll apologize and they'll make amends and hopefully never do it again. These are isolated incidences, but when this type of behavior becomes the norm, rather than an occasional childish outburst, then it's likely abuse. Especially when the victim has made it really clear that this kind of behavior hurts them a lot. I think one of the problems is that these incidences of abuse, they kind of sneak up on you. Your partner could have a rageful outburst because you didn't do something that they wanted you to do. Or they can suddenly glare at you, walk away, slam the door, and give you the silent treatment, leaving you perplexed as to why they're not speaking to you. Because more likely than not, if this person is manipulative and abusive, they're going to leave you hanging and suffering. They're not going to tell you why. And when this happens, it can be quite shocking and it can be very hurtful. People who are empathetic, they'll feel the hurt, but at least in the first stages of the relationship, they may also feel concern for their partner. They won't necessarily automatically assume that their partner is being abusive. I didn't. I was hurt, but I was also concerned for his feelings. I wanted to find out what was going on with him, and I wanted to help him through it because I loved him. The only thing I knew from abusive relationships was it was physically abusive relationships. That's all I knew. And I had no idea about emotionally abusive relationships. I didn't even know that there was such a thing as a verbally abusive relationship. I honestly figured that, well, that's just the way my late husband talked. And he told me that. He said he swears, yeah, but that's just the way he talks. That's his language, and I should not be offended by it. So this deepened my belief that this is just the way he is. This is not abusive. Yes, he's difficult and he can be hurtful, but as he said, it's just the way he was hardwired. He actually told me that he was a self-proclaimed a-hole, and he asked me to accept him for who he was. I mean, what can you say to that? Especially when you're very ignorant to what emotional and verbal abuse is. I wanted to be accepted for who I was, so I decided to accept him for who he was. Unfortunately, though, because I wasn't educated about intimate partner abuse, I went through many years of pain and quiet shame simply because I didn't know what was really happening. These isolated incidences became more frequent, they lasted longer, and they were more aggressive and intense. And suddenly, we have a pattern of abuse going on. I think that the only reason that I reached out at first anonymously to those hotlines was because I started noticing that he was hurting me more often. I still didn't see it as a pattern of abuse. I just felt very alone and sad and very hurt a lot of the times. I felt depression coming back, a condition that I had been managing very successfully for years. Anxiety started to come back again, and that's another condition that I had managed for so long. If not for the depression and anxiety and the panic attacks that followed, I may not have even reached out to anyone. You know, if you've been brought up in a family where your parents yell and scream at each other, they cuss at each other, they may throw things at each other or cheat on each other, that's your normal. That's what you're used to. If you watch one of your parents regularly hit the other, sadly, this is your normal. As growing children, we notice everything, and our brains are susceptible to our environment. I was watching a documentary the other day. There was a man who was being interviewed who said that as he was growing up, he watched his father regularly beat his mother and degrade her verbally. He said that when he got to the age of about 16, if his mother tried to tell him what to do and he didn't want to do it, he started to degrade her verbally and he started to hit her. For him, that's the way the world was. That's what he was used to. That was his normal. And he said it took him to the age of about 35 to hit rock bottom. He got arrested and he went to prison for domestic abuse. And it took all that in order for him to realize that this was not normal, that what he was doing was his normal as he was brought up. He said it took a lot of therapy and a lot of faith for him to change his mindset and realize that it wasn't healthy in an intimate partner relationship to do what he was doing. And this is a great story about somebody who turned their life around. But it all came down to the fact that he had no clue what abuse was. He was just following in his father's footsteps, blindly abusing women for his entire life until the law stopped him. He's now a motivational speaker for men in prison who have been arrested on domestic violence charges. I appreciated hearing his story because even though he harmed a lot of people, he finally was able to recognize that what he was doing was wrong, and it was because he became educated. Now that's somebody who lacked understanding of abuse, who was an abuser. Now, what about someone who lacks understanding of abuse, who is a victim? I'm going to be very transparent and saying that I had a difficult upbringing. As a child growing up, I didn't realize what physical abuse was. I didn't realize what emotional abuse was. But I experienced both of these things. As I developed into an adult, I had relationships that were abusive. Of the 4 intimate relationships that I had in my life, I experienced some form of abuse in 3 of them. One of those relationships, it was when I was very young. He was such a nice guy, irresponsible with money, but really, really nice. The relationship didn't last very long, and it makes me wonder why. My normal wasn't nice. My normal was not being with someone who treated me well. My normal was filled with abuse, chaos, manipulation, and distress. And I ended up finding 3 relationships that followed that pattern. And all of this stemmed from not understanding what abuse really was. Even though there is a multitude of information out there, especially these days with the internet, I still didn't understand what abuse really was until about 2018, when that counselor from that distress hotline said those words to me. And even then, I didn't believe her. I didn't believe her because I didn't understand it. Abuse doesn't happen to me. I thought about that. Abuse happens to other women. He never hit me. How could he be abusing me? That was really my way of thinking at the time. And it's also interesting that I ended up working with a company who used manipulation tactics on all of its employees to get them to work more hours for less pay. Now, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but it definitely happened to me. I was very susceptible to manipulation. Due to my upbringing, I became a people pleaser. And I think that abusive people and manipulators can see when a person is a people pleaser, and you kind of become a target. This happens a lot in the work environment, and most people who are victims of abuse at work, they don't necessarily see it as abuse. They may see it as, oh, he's just a typical boss, something like that. I remember I was walking my dogs during the summer of 2025, after my late husband took his life, and I had this light bulb moment. I'd been thinking about the relationship, the marriage, and the relationship with my parents and my siblings, with that company I worked for, and all of the intimate partner relationships that I'd had in my adult life. And I said out loud, oh my gosh, almost every relationship I had as an adult was either with my mother or my father or both. And what I'm referring to was the way I was treated. I was either physically abused, emotionally abused, or manipulated in most of my relationships as an adult. And I thought sadly about how I put up with that treatment for so long because I thought it was normal. That was a real eye-opener for me during that walk. And I've said this before, the first step to being able to walk away from an abusive relationship is to educate yourself. If you're going through a situation where your intimate partner or with a family member or an employer, and there's something inside your gut and it's kind of saying to you, you're not being treated the way you should be treated, with respect and decency, then you need to figure out what's really going on. Just because the person who is treating you badly says to you, well, this is just the way it is, you're overreacting, you're too sensitive. This is how everybody talks. Just because they try to make you believe all of this, it doesn't make it true. After that distress line counselor told me that I was in an abusive relationship, at first, I completely dismissed it. But then as the days and the weeks and the months went by, I paid more attention to my late husband's behavior. I started to look up videos on abuse. I educated myself on emotional abuse. I started to read books, and I started to talk a little bit more about it. First, I called anonymous hotlines, but eventually I actually went to see a social worker in person. And after that, I started seeing a therapist. It's a huge letdown when you realize that you're being abused. And I did try to speak to my late husband about it. And at first he denied everything. He gave me the usual excuses, but then he opened up to me and he said, Rain, I was told that I abused every woman in my family for my entire life. And here I am abusing my girlfriend who I love. And then he apologized and he made promises to stop it and to go to therapy. He was very vulnerable, and I knew that he was being genuine in the moment. I believed him. This was back in 2018, and I know that he meant well at the time, but he didn't follow through. And in fact, years later when I brought it up, he actually denied saying any of that. So my friends, that is the first reason why we stay in emotionally abusive relationships and in any abusive situation. I speak mostly about emotionally and verbally abusive relationships because that was my own personal experience. Again, if you're feeling that something's off in your relationship, I would say try to educate yourself on what you're going through first. If it means watching credible videos, reading books, talking to a therapist, or like I did, calling a domestic abuse hotline anonymously, then it's worth the time and effort. It takes courage to learn about something that's so awful and sad, but it might spark something in you to realize that maybe this is not normal. Maybe this is not healthy. In my next video in this series that will be coming out next Monday, I'll discuss trauma bonds and emotional attachment in intimate partner relationships. Until then, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Please be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.